And I watched myself walk down the same path, thinking that now, because I knew better, I would be able to manage his avoidant attachment style better. And it was such a form of delusion. Hello, welcome back to another episode. In this one, we are going to dive into a bit of the nitty-gritty, the tools, the path, the structure of what it looks like to move from anxious attachment tendencies to secure tendencies. And I want to start by sharing an analogy / small story that I think really paints the picture of what it's actually like to go on this journey. So the story goes like this. There was a man and he needed to get across town. So he took the path that felt right and it took him through a tunnel, and in that tunnel he fell into a big hole. The second day he needed to get across town, and so this time he decided to take the same path, which took him into the same tunnel. This time he tried to inch his way along the side of the hole, but he still fell in. On the third day that the man needed to get across town, he took the same path with the same tunnel, and this time he was able to successfully inch his way around the side of the hole without falling in, but it wasn't without stress. And on the fourth day, the man needed to get across town. He took a different path with no tunnel and no hole at all. What I love about this and what it really mirrors is that often in our healing journey of our relating dynamics, the patterns that we run, the partners that we choose, it's often little by little that we start to attract different types of people and different scenarios, and that we can experience and hold ourselves differently and more securely in these different scenarios. So I can remember vividly after I had gained so much awareness on a mental level about my attachment style that I was presented once again with a partner that was avoidant, quite emotionally unavailable, and not ready for a committed relationship. And I watched myself walk down the same path, thinking that now, because I knew better, I would be able to manage his avoidant attachment style better. Like I had this scholar lens all of a sudden, and I could use it deeper to my advantage to basically try and manipulate them into feeling extra comfortable and extra safe with me. And it was such a form of delusion that, of course, I could only see in hindsight, but to me, that was the perfect example of walking around the edge of the hole, but still falling in. And before that, it's like we just blindly walk and fall into the hole. Before we know anything about this, we just are falling into the hole without realizing that it's a pattern and that it's something within us. And then there's a point where you probably see what's going on, and maybe you see yourself still trying to get around that hole, but inevitably falling in. And to me, that was more painful, but also a very pivotal part of this, because it was like, oh, now I'm fully consenting to these painful dynamics and ending up in heartbreak. And that was what allowed me to vow that I was not going to do that again. I would still say that there was a time of walking around the edge of the hole, of kind of being like, oh yeah, I see this avoidant thing happening and I'm going to get around it. I'm going to walk away from it, but it was close. I considered what it might be like to go check out the hole again and see maybe it was different this time. And I had to really take my time and sort through, is this meant for me? Is this not meant for me? And now I can confidently say it's just a path that I'm not interested in walking. I'm not attracted to those sorts of dynamics anymore. It doesn't feel good in my body. It doesn't feel addictive anymore because of the work that is done in between all those rounds of the tunnel, If we're doing the right work, the somatic work, the internal psyche work, the healing work, the trauma healing work, it really causes a shift. It causes us to no longer desire to even play with the risk of the hole. But what I want to share with you is what it takes to be able to reorient from the default pattern of walking towards potentially painful dynamics where our needs aren't being met, or we're feeling really anxious, or we're tolerating breadcrumbs, all the things that tend to come with anxious tendencies. What we're really trying to cultivate on the other side, so you can get a picture of it, is a deep sense of self-trust. I actually think that's a part of this discussion that often gets missed a little bit. It's implied in so many ways, and it happens naturally through lots of different modalities, but I want to point to the fact that that is what we're cultivating. And self-trust brings us to a point where we know that we are going to take care of ourselves, and we trust that we are going to make decisions that are for our highest good and our highest well-being. And so often our inner trust is broken because we've fallen into these patterns of believing that we need to self-sabotage or cross our own boundaries or people please in order to get love, right? That's abandoning a part of ourselves, the part that wants to feel loved unconditionally, taken care of unconditionally, and supported. And right alongside there is self-worth and self-love, because often the attachment, adaptation, and behaviors that we use are representative of pedestaling other people, putting other people before us. Usually in the anxious attachment style, that's pretty common. We have this underlying assumption that they're going to leave us or we're not good enough for them. And then we start to shapeshift to be who we think they want us to be. And we can tend to really reserve what we want, be really tolerant of behavior that we know doesn't feel good, be tolerant of communication that we know doesn't feel good, commitment levels that we know don't feel good. But because this part of us, again, that formed at a really young age, has a belief that this is what love feels like, it's very easy for us to kind of diminish our own self-worth and diminish choosing ourselves as valuable, because part of us so deeply believes we need to choose the other person and really have our awareness on the other person and what they need in order for us to feel satisfied. So for the anxious attacher, one of the things that we really need to master is self-soothing, which is just as it sounds. It's self-regulating, self-calming, being able to be independent within ourselves without needing to experience validation from the external world in order to feel enough or in order to feel okay. And I can explain that, and it sounds simple, but it's really the crux of a lot of shifting from an anxious attachment to secure attachment tendencies, is being able to master the self-soothing. So what we often see in anxious attachers is either a fear of being alone, or really not liking being alone, wanting your friends or partner or someone around all the time. Or, I think less talked about, is the anxious attacher who doesn't mind being alone and actually can spend time alone and is very independent, but is still seeking a lot of external validation, whether that's through being a really high achiever, being a perfectionist, being a people pleaser, or just a deep desire and need for external validation from men, for example. So the tool here is self-soothing, and that looks different for everyone, but what it really is being able to cultivate internal resource and a place internally that allows you to come back to safety, to feeling a sense of love and feeling supported and held within your own body, within your own energy existence, without it needing to come externally or from a partner. So, for example, the somatic practice that we did in the last video is an example of self-soothing, because what you're able to do is find a calm, relaxed, peaceful state within your body, bring your nervous system into something that mirrored what it feels like to go into an anxious reaction or an anxious tendency, and then bringing yourself back down to being soothed. And this is something that we have to practice, and we have to just remember that with your breath, with your presence, you can bring yourself back into your center. And sometimes this requires really letting your body and your emotions move in the way that they want to. So as an adult, it can feel wrong or childish to feel like, I want to curl up in a ball and cry right now, or I want to get really mad and hit a pillow into the wall. But I would 100% encourage you to do just that, because when we consciously bring our awareness to these parts of ourselves that are feeling this deep anxiety, this deep fear of rejection, this deep urgency, whatever it is for you, there is a childlike part within you that didn't get the need met. That's the part that's crying. That's the part that's reaching. That's the part that's feeling desperate, feeling anxious. It's actually this really young, immatured, as in not yet mature part of you that is trapped in time, trapped in your psyche, that's still running these patterns, and it's really dictating your life. If that didn't fully land for you, definitely rewind 60 seconds and listen to it again, because it's a key point of what we're looking at here. And so, as I was saying, when we are practicing self-soothing, it's not about shutting down the anxious emotions. It's actually about letting them run their course and then being there to hold ourselves through it. So there's a really powerful line that one of my facilitator teachers and mentors introduced to me for this work, and it's saying to yourself, I will breathe with you as long as you need. And that helps us to eventually find our way back to ground, find our way back to something that feels solid. But before that regulating sentence, we need to allow ourselves to express. We need to validate that it hurts. If you're feeling heartbreak because of this repeating pattern or something that recently happened, just letting your body move those emotions, curl up, cry, scream into a pillow, and stay connected to that feeling and allow it to release from your body. That creates the space and also liberation for you to soothe from a place that's just more spacious. And then you get to come back to the mature core of your adult being that has the awareness, but is probably having trouble integrating because there's so much still in the body that hasn't been expressed, potentially for years and years and years. So we want to let our body express and run the course in a way of what it feels like, instead of trying to shut it down because you feel like you shouldn't feel this way, because then we're just fighting with ourselves. Sometimes we just have to let it express. Thirdly, self-soothing often looks like just being really comfortable, spending time alone without too much distraction. So there's a time and a place for distraction on the healing journey, which might look like social media or watching a TV show, but it's not necessarily productive, and that's okay. But sometimes it is just a matter of, I need to get my mind off of this so I don't text him again or think about texting him again, and put on your favorite YouTuber and get sucked into that to just try and create some space. But before that, what can we do to just be with ourselves and allow ourselves to enjoy that time? And this is something that's going to require a little more attention or presence and feeling into what else might feel good in this scenario. When we really want to be soothed by someone else, when we want someone else to comfort us, what might feel probably not quite as good, but maybe just as good. And it could be an adult coloring book, or walking in nature, going for a bike ride, making a playlist. Maybe you have another medium like writing poetry or writing a story, or you like to create Pinterest boards. Not all of those are the same level of presence and mindfulness versus distraction necessarily, but it is really helpful to tune back into those things that make you feel like you and experiment with it in what makes you feel connected to yourself, because so often we have been trained and conditioned to not even explore those things. So you might feel like, I don't know what I like to do, and it is an experiment. And I'll say again, like, it's not gonna feel as good to go color in your adult coloring book as it would feel if that guy texts you. I totally get that. It's the levels of dopamine are different, but the point is to practice self-soothing so that we can balance how much validation basically we get from those two different sources of stimulus. The fourth thing I'll say about self-soothing is taking a closer look at what inner child work has to do with it. So I'm sure you've heard this word inner child work if you're interested in personal development or healing, then of course you've heard of it. Maybe you've done an inner child meditation before, but why it's important is because this experience happened, most likely, the experiences that created anxious attachment tendencies most likely happened when we were younger, and therefore there's kind of these not fully developed parts of our brain, and I don't mean literally, I mean like not fully matured parts of ourselves that are stuck in time. And when you feel into them, you can kind of really feel the younger girl within yourself. Just imagine her right now, whatever comes to mind, 2 years old, 6 years old, 8-year-old version of you, whatever feels natural. and just see if you can feel that immediate compassion and patience and understanding that you would have for her. That is a hint towards the part of you that didn't get her needs met in the way that she wanted to. And it also points us towards the opportunity of what we need to give ourselves specifically in order to self-soothe. There's another word that you may have not heard of, which is called reparenting, which is just as it sounds. It's basically being the parent or the adult that we needed or that we need now. What we just need to look at is what do we need and what can we feel within ourselves that we need, and how willing can we be to give that to ourselves. As you go deeper into this work, you will be met with inner child work right away. It's like, in some ways, so much deeper than a lot of other things, but in other ways, like the first deep step. And whether you're doing that through your own exploration or with a therapist you work with, or if you come into my membership space and do the somatic therapy work with me there, you will be put into this position of getting really confronted with the needs that weren't met. And sometimes those needs feel very childish because, as I said, we're working with these parts of us that aren't necessarily really matured. And so if your body is telling you that she needs rest, are you willing to give yourself rest? If your body is telling you that she needs play and wants to go do something freaking random that you're like, oh yeah, I actually used to do that as a child, are you willing to give that to her? Because by doing that, we're recompleting these cycles of trust and healing the self-trust that got broken in all the ways that we have potentially abandoned that over our life, not because it's bad or it's your fault or you even knew what you were doing, but just because of the conditioning and operating out of a survival response instead of a regulated place. Some of the final pieces of your healing in terms of anxious attachment style will happen in relationship, because the trauma happened in relationship, in relation to another person. And so healing happens in relation to another person as well. And that can be with a practitioner, it can be with your friends, and it can be obviously in a romantic relationship. But before that can happen, we cannot expect someone else to do that work for us. We cannot just think, oh, if it was the right person, I wouldn't feel anxious. We can't just outsource it to a secure person in order to heal us. It's not going to work like that. We have to really first master our own connection to our inner self, our own self-soothing, and really do the work to heal all the versions of our inner child and our inner teenager, so that we have more of a calm foundation to bring another person into in order to relate to them from a more stable place, even though they will offer deeper depths of the healing experience and they will be a mirror and you will get to grow through them as well. So finally, I would love to give you way more tools to support in your self-soothing practice. I know, not the sexiest thing, but honestly, it's the work that makes a difference on the external parts of your life. It's the work that helps to heal triggers and basically erase triggers. That's actually one of the things that I can confidently stand by that somatic work does. It can dissolve triggers, which is amazing when you just feel neutral about something that used to feel so charged. And all of those tools I keep feeding into my community space. It's a subscription-based offer, so you can come in, binge more of it if you want to, leave when you need to, come in and out. There's live workshops every month, there's live calls, there's coaching for you, there's so many guided somatic practices, and there's the 1, 2, 3, these are the steps in this order, the tools for mindset reframing, and also to do the inner child work and the body-based work in order to be able to build that solid foundation to relate to someone else in, so that the relationships that you are building, whether you are already in one or not, are more solid and reciprocal and loving and amazing and passionate and all of the things that you want to feel. And some of the practices in there that will be specifically helpful would be tools for when things really aren't going well, the teaching called How and Why to Do Inner Child Work, and then the guided somatic practice called Managing Anxious Attachment Thoughts. Those are things that you really do need to master in order to be operating from a more secure place consistently. So there's a link in the description below for you. Just look for Becoming Secure and I will meet you inside. And also would love to hear any feedback in the comments. What was helpful? What questions do you have? I'm here to support you. And I'll see you in the next video.